in depth on issues, and then we can report back to the larger group and see where we're going in terms of that. So that's what we're trying to do today, and I'll be working with Joe along with other DOT team members, which will kind of float in and out, keep track of where we're up to try to answer questions and all of that. You are all unmuted. I don't know whether you noticed that or not, but you're all unmuted. And as a result, we literally want to treat this like a focus group. And anybody can talk whenever they'd like. So, you know, we can talk as we go. We don't have to wait to chat at particular points in time. And so, you know, feel free, if you're confused about something, you want a little more information on what Joe's talking about, you can ask, you know, so feel free to stop them and all that. We realize there's a lot of information, but we do have an hour, so we can talk about quite a bit of detail and still probably easily complete our efforts. There are this meeting is to the public in terms of observation. There may be members of the public in our group, and that's good if they are, because we want that to occur. And as you know, this meeting, the full meeting is being recorded, including our breakout sessions, and all of that's going to be published on the project website. So let's see, I'm trying to make sure I've covered all my intro points. We do want you to note that although we'll do our best to answer all the questions, there may be some questions that we'll have to save to the closing session. But if we do get questions that we don't get to, those are going to be noted. I'm taking notes throughout the course of the meeting such that we will answer all the questions and post those answers on the website. There are 2 bridge experts that are floaters, and they'll come in and check in with Joe during the course of the session. And if we have any really sophisticated questions that Joe can't answer, which I doubt we're going to have because Joe's a pretty expert in this business, we have other resources to help us out. Once we conclude, we're going back to the larger group. So we're gonna spend about a half hour back with the full group, and we're going to hear a report out from each of the 5 or 6 subcommittees or 5 or 6 focus groups that we've got going tonight. So you'll have a chance to hear what came out of the other groups, and I'll report to the best of my ability what came out of our group as well. So as I said, feel free to ask questions and make points and make statements, express your opinions and thoughts and preferences. This is just the beginning of this discussion. It's going to continue on for many months, but we do need to get started and get into some of the design details moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Joe, unless there are any questions for me, and we'll get started.
I can give my cell phone number in case anybody in the group needs to reach me if there's an issue or anything. If y'all are ready, my cell phone number is 318-792-9376, and I'll be monitoring that, but I'll be on mute. People are mowing their lawns right now, so that's probably kind of loud. So I'll go back on mute.
Thank you, Felice. And let's take a minute and just go around and introduce each other. And since I can see all the screen, I'll just call on people, but not everybody here knows each other. So we thought maybe that would be helpful. I think I've introduced Joe already. Felice is one of the planners on the project. She's got an extensive background in community and environmental planning. James Proctor. We've got 2 James.
Hey everybody, James Proctor. I live in the Laplace neighborhood, which is west of the proposed I-49 connector, probably about 4 blocks from where the route's going to be, the proposed route.
James Clark.
All right. Hi everybody, I'm James Clark. I'm also in Laplace, more on the Fightonville side, closer to the interstate. So I'm, I'll say 2 blocks off maybe at Simcoe and Pierce.
Thanks. Roderick?
Hi, my name is Roderick. I'm part of the LCP team. I'm just a little bit newer to the project and going to be contributing a little bit more in the future. Thank you.
Neil?
Hey, John. Neil LaBeouf here. I work for Lafayette Consolidated Government as a planner. I've been involved in the I-49 project since about 2006. So there's an extensive history of this project, and I'm glad to see it moving forward.
Michael. Michael, are you there?
He may be a member of the public.
Maybe a member of the public. Okay. Noel?
This is Noelle Ardwin. I'm the administrator of the environmental section at DOTD, and I am serving as a floater, so I'll be coming in and out to hear the different comments that everybody's making.
Okay. And Lori, I think Lori's a floater too, but why don't you introduce yourself since you're starting with us, Lori?
Hi, sure. I'm just jumping in, checking on screen capabilities and all the good fun admin stuff. So if you see me popping in and out, I'm actually with the communications team. You've seen me on emails, but I will be sneaking around from room to room.
Okay, and we have one other member of the public observing this group as well. So Joe, stage is yours.
All right. Well, actually, I want to find out if everybody in this room here had gone through that presentation. Reason why I asked is that I wanted to find out to what extent we want to go through it, or should we skip and hop and get to a particular aspect that the group feel more interested in or feel more compelled to express your feeling about them, about what you've seen. So did everybody, well, I don't see everybody with the camera on. I was about to say with a show of hand. Whether, okay, I see James Proctor. Yeah, both James raised their hand, indicated they have gone, they've been and seen the presentation. I can go through it kind of quickly, I mean, without going into great detail. Anyone who wants to just pause and get a little bit more in a particular subject, perhaps. Right? So I see John nodding in agreement. So let me try and see if I still remember how to share my screen. I am, of course, now looking for hopefully the right screen. Let me know when you see the presentation.
We see it.
Okay.
Joseph, real quick if I can. One of the questions that I had yesterday, and I was about 10 minutes late jumping in, but all the different options that were thrown out there, am I right that they have the same structural integrity and that the long term they're going to last just the same?
Yes, in fact, the design code and specifications that we will be following is going to put everything on par. There is a difference, and in some of the slides, we actually have gone into the life cycle cost. So in order to maintain that level of performance, different type tend to draw a little bit more or less resources. For example, some of the type would have more bearing devices, and just simply to look through them or possibly replace some of them along the during the service life would mean that that particular option may cost a little bit more. But the design intent is to put everything on equal par so that when you evaluate, we evaluate construction costs plus the life cycle cost. So you can actually look apple to apple when you look at the total construction cost.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, sorry.
Sorry, maybe I missed this part. What is the goal of this breakout group? What are we supposed to come out of this with?
The goal of this breakout group is to have a more in-depth discussion, or have an in-depth discussion of these various design options. And well, it's, first of all, I would say the goal is to make sure you all have a good understanding of the differences between the design options. and answer any questions to help with that understanding. And then secondly, see how we've done evaluation up to this point, and feel free to comment on that evaluation. And then thirdly, as a member of the LCAG, which is our key advisory group on the project, feel free to express your opinion as to whether you like something, don't like it, why you think it would be appropriate for the I-49 connector in its location and in its Lafayette context, adjacent to some of your neighborhoods and downtown. So this is the first cut, you might say, at beginning to get input on design that's going to go on now for almost a year in terms of discussion with this committee, neighborhood groups, public workshops, and key stakeholders throughout the project. So not the only opportunity is what I'm trying to say, but it's the first opportunity. And so and we feel since the working group is so intensely working with us, that's why you are the first people involved in getting this opportunity.
James,
Sound
I think
okay?
you're on mute.
You're up, Joe.
Okay, I thought James was about to say something.
Oh, maybe so.
Okay, go ahead, James.
So this is us going back over the presentation again with a little more depth. We're not expected to return to the group with any particular conclusions towards a larger group input. This is just basically us breaking into smaller groups to go over the same material at this point.
Yes, and if you want to express some opinions or thoughts, or feel free, but we're not required to do that. And
or simply just to ask a question whether or not we can answer it right here, it would be reported back into the larger group, and if nothing else, solicit more thoughts into action.
Going to be in the same breakout groups from here on, or how's that going to work?
That's a good question. I don't know that we've actually thought that through. We're probably always going to be doing about 5, 6, 7 breakout groups. That's a good way to break up about 50, 55 people, which is the membership of the overall LCAG. We've randomly, by just using the alphabetical order up at this point. If you think that's a good idea going forward, we definitely can consider that.
Guys, can I ask one more thing before you jump into the meat of it?
Absolutely.
Hey, I was looking around that virtual room y'all have set up, and I saw on it that the on-ramps, off-ramps are configured as far as that setup goes for that Willow Street interchange. And I'm wondering, has that decision been made that it's going to be at Willow, or is there still the option to get a downtown connection?
Great question. Thank you for asking that question. The answer is the decision has not been made. And as you saw from probably the virtual groups and/or the website presentations, we've got 4 alternatives that are under consideration for the SEIS, Environmental Impact Statement. And in workshop 3, we're going to get into that in a lot of detail. But the 4 issues that really differentiate the alternatives are, would we go with the Grand Boulevard through the downtown area to replace the old interchanges that were there? Or would we go with an enhanced couplet similar to what's going on today, but like I say, a much more enhanced couplet through the downtown area? And then would we have the downtown exit ramp at Willow, just south of Willow, which is one of the options, or would we not have that downtown, or would we add an access ramp to downtown a little closer to downtown? And then of course, if you combine all those 4 options in every different configuration, you get 4 alternatives, and that's what our 4 alternatives are. So there's really 2 big decisions that we'll all be facing, and we're going to really want your input on it in a big way, come workshop number 3 and 4 in that area, and that is where should we have that access ramp to downtown and Couplet versus Grand Boulevard? But the answer, James, is no. We haven't made that decision at all. In fact, that's one of the alternatives considering.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'm going to go through this presentation a little bit better pace than we did yesterday. So we'll talk about the objective, especially for this particular breakout group. So I'll just move on. And we already talked about this the project site. And the virtual room is actually focused very much in this area where that viaduct is. I think it's actually starts somewhere around here. So some of you already visited, and it's quite exciting, even for me. I've seen different versions before this, but this is actually really get the feel as to what we might be looking at. So one thing that to point out again is that the viaduct itself is about 2 miles long, and it's a 2 separated structure. It's actually a nice width with a generous shoulder, but it carries 4 lanes going each direction. The bridge type that we have gone through, 2 of them are more of the types that is done in the state of Louisiana, the LG girder and the LU girder. But then the segmental box girder, which is the one on the bottom, is something that has been used around the country quite a bit with its own benefit at a slightly higher construction cost, which we'll cover again later. So the LG girder essentially are I-shaped girder. Most of them are pre-stressed in the precasting yard, and the entire piece will be brought to the job site. It has a upper range of about 175 feet. And a view on the underside of the LG girder, basically you've seen longitudinal beam that go from pier cap to pier cap. And we'll cover a little bit more on the aesthetics aspects of it later. And this gives you kind of a side view. And you can see that the girder a little bit closer to the barrier. And it does give a little bit of a different feel as we go into other options. And then the LU girder, you can see that there's a terminology here that says that pre or post tensioning. Basically, the pre-tensioning means that there is high tension wire that is buried in the concrete in the fabrication yard, so that it's kind of high tension wire that hold up the girder when you pick it up and move it around. But then we also leave holes in these girders, and we put more high tension wire in them and tension them up after the girder is erected. And what this does is that it actually allows the girder to span a little bit more, because we can make them so-called continuous over the support. As a result, you can see that these girders go up as much as 250 feet in span. And you can see from the underside, they are not quite as like many of them, and they are not packed quite as close together. On the outside, it doesn't look tremendously different. I mean, looking from far away side view. And then the segmental box girder. This type of construction has the ability to allow the span to go to a much longer span. The only thing is that the structured depth has to be different in order for it to reach a greater span length. And we can talk a little bit more about that later on in terms of the versatility of this particular type of construction. And on the other side, what it does is that you can see there's a bit more of an overhang, and the piers are pulled in a little bit farther from the edge of the roadway. As a result, you can actually see the barrier highlighted with a little bit of a shadow. So it just have a different feel and different look. And later on, we'll repeat this claim, but essentially you have fewer pier for this particular kind of girder.
Does this option let in more light too? Is that something y'all discussed at the last one?
Yes, it would. And we in fact has a graphic that would illustrate how we evaluate that. So the criteria, just at a high level, we're going to look at evaluating based on cost, based on the maintenance of traffic, and then of course the aesthetic also is an important part of what we would consider. And we'll go through the finer point of them as we get into the slides. But first, the cost of that. You can see that the total cost that I talked about earlier encompassed the initial construction costs plus what we call life cycle costs. That is for the maintenance and the inspection and so on. And we add the two together to come up with the total cost. And you can see the comparison in dollar per square foot of each of the girder types. We go in and actually evaluate the premium if we want a area feel under the viaduct. If we were to go, instead of being 22 feet off from the ground, if we have vertical clearance, the underside of the girder being 30 feet off the ground, there'll be a premium, not a huge premium, but definitely the premium, and we figure it to be about 15 million.
So James, why don't you jump in for a second? I've got a question right after yours.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Joseph, so the difference in these costs, what's the breakout cost? How much of that cost difference, say, if we wanted the SB over the LG, how much of that cost?
I'm sorry, James.
James, we're losing you in terms of, you're kind of fading in and out in terms of volume.
Okay, I'll try it again. How
Okay.
much of the difference in cost will the city have to soak up? So say we decide we want the SB, it's clearly more expensive. How much would we have to pay for over the cost of the LG?
Yeah, my question dovetails with his. Is there essentially a number that we're looking at that we need to fit into with all the different choices? And then, like James is saying, are we going to come out of pocket as a city for the rest?
John,
Joe, would you like me to answer that question?
Yes, I would. Go ahead,
Yeah,
John.
okay. First of all, we do not have a budget we're trying to fit into on this project. And so as a result, we're not trying to say hit 400 million or less, something like that. So we do not have a budget at this point in time, and we have not had a budget the entire time we've been discussing the project. So that's that answer. And as a result, there is no determination that's been made as to what the maximum investment would be on the part of the DOTD. Generally, the discussion has been is that enhancements to the project, like activities under the corridor, maybe a lot of the pedestrian and bicycle kinds of things that have been discussed, and some of those things like parks under the corridor and things like that, would probably be more of a low cost. But generally, the structure itself, the transportation, the interstate transportation facility, its ramp, and all of that would be a basic cost of financed by the federal and state governments. If we start doing a lot of arts integration or cultural reference integration, some of that kind of stuff, that might be considered an enhancement. But I don't really know, and I've never really heard up to this point, that the differences between any of these three alternative structure types is considered an enhancement. So I think you could generally assume that whatever's decided as a result of this analysis is more or less a technical analysis as well as community input. And these are certainly eligible for the basic project with, I don't think, any upcharges involved with the city.
Well, John, this is Steve Wallace. I would kind of chime in with that. I think DOTD's kind of left the palette kind of open at this point, and trying to hear what the city of Lafayette really does want.
Right.
And obviously, if you save money on one element, it may release the ability to have some funds to do something else. But they haven't made a decision on which one of these they would go with based strictly on cost. They are wanting to get some input. Doesn't mean that they would automatically go to the highest cost, no. But they do want to get input and hear from you guys what it is you want and the reasons why you think it'd be important. And so it's right. Kind of a chicken and egg thing, you know. They're not starting from one place, but they're saying, hey, give us some input and let's have a dialogue about it. And we can kind of roll a lot of this together and see where we end up.
Right. And by the way, this is Steve Wallace, our overall project manager for the LCP team.
Yeah, I'm kind of floating in and out of meetings. So.
He's a floater. He's a floater.
Right.
Okay. I also wanted to let y'all know, Andy, you are unmuted. If your phone was causing some feedback, I may mute and unmute you, but I want to make sure that you're able to contribute.
I can hear you. I can hear you, and I can speak now. It's just that my computer has no microphone, and I'm logged in visually to room 1, and I'm speaking to room 3.
Oh, wow.
Well,
okay.
I can
I'm needless to say, I'm a little clueless right now.
Okay, so you want to go to room 1?
Well, that would be fine. I'd have to transfer my audio to room 1. If you could do that, that would be good.
Okay.
But I'm keeping up with y'all on your vocal. So if you actually move the video to room 3, I'd probably be better off where you are.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Let us know
Thank you.
how you end up with that. Okay. Did I answer?
You got it.
Yeah,
everything's good otherwise.
Okay. Did between Steve and I, did we answer both questions, both James' questions?
You got mine.
I'm sitting good right now.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So moving on. So the first criteria is MOT, and especially for James, you're 2 blocks away. You'll be seeing a lot of these exciting activity. Of course, the biggest issue with maintenance of traffic would be a scheme that reduces the amount of road closure, minimize the number of falls work that need to be there to support construction, and to reduce the construction footprint, meaning the piece of equipment that is going to be around the construction site, are all the type of consideration as far as the maintenance of traffic is concerned.
Understanding that any inconvenience would be temporary. How long is temporary though?
Well, actually, the temporary from one location to another, just you have several paths in terms of the duration. The first pass is to put the foundation and the pier column in. And then usually construction is such that the team that work on the foundation and the pier column would move out of the way. So you have a lull in activity until they start coming in with the big crane and the trucks that carry the superstructure of the girder pieces and put them in place. So all the options that we are evaluating now has most of the superstructure or a good number of the superstructure prefabricated, and that would reduce the duration of the impact.
If you had to ballpark the longest period that the construction time would take, what do you think that would be?
For each activity or a span or?
I guess I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Let me go to the next slide.
Sure, sure.
It talk about the temporary works and the road closure. For example, to cast a pier and so on probably depends on how motivated the contractor is to get out of the place. You might be driving piles and doing the pile cap in 2 weeks, and another 2 weeks or so to be able to get the pier out of the way. Now you can see that they are in succession. So within your block, you probably will have them working at around your block for a couple of months to get the foundation phase out of the way. And as far as the girder is concerned, it actually could go rather quickly. The crane, all the LG girder scheme take longer because now they have to move the lifting equipment in, and then they would have to position them just the right way so that when the girder come in, they get picked up and put on onto the pier cap. And then they would have to do the forming and so on and get the superstructure done. So I think that between the two, the LG girders and the LG girder, in order for them to get a span out of the way enough that it's no longer infringing on your girder in your neighborhood, probably going to be another couple of months. Okay? So each phase would be a couple of months, and they'll be out of your neighborhood. So the SB girder is a little bit different in that after the pier construction, and again, for the type and the size that we have, we see the contractor probably end up using some specialized erection equipment that lie on top of the pier. And the superstructure will be brought in. Chances are, in the middle of the night, you might not even know that they came in, and then they would pick up the pieces vertically. So as far as the construction is concerned, we would say that the segmental bridge would be felt the least from the neighborhood standpoint. And that's the reason why you can see that the LG girder has a yellow, and then the green is for the SG girder. So this is basically all along the same line to illustrate again that most of the superstructure is in fact going to be erected in precast. Depends on the location. It might get trickier if you have an unusually wide or askew crossing that you need to bridge over, that you need some temporary support in there. But for the most part that we can see along the main line, there won't be a whole lot of this incident where we'll end up having a false work that will cause a major interruption. That's the game plan that we have so far. So the LG girder is one that ironically may use this type of band a little bit more. That's why it's in yellow. And the other two scheme, once they get them in the air, sitting on the pier, you won't feel as much activity while they're doing the superstructure. Actually, this is more of the same. As far as the footprint is concerned, the LG girder and LU girder require the big cranes. And as a result, we call them the footprint to be quite a bit larger. Whereas segmental construction, most of the time, right after the superstructure gets the truck in position, it get lifted up, and literally within an hour, it is up off the truck, and the truck goes away. So it's that's the reason why the SB girder get a green mark. And then, of course, this may or may not be as big of an impact. Depends on the contractor's logistic. But some of these LU girder and LG girder are long, 150, 170 feet long. So it could be quite a big piece to line up in the neighborhood a little bit more than the the segmental piece that will come in more of a regular size truck. This is called a lowboy, so it's a fairly compact piece of equipment. And that's the reason why we have many more green for the segmental girder. It is pretty much kind of over time, that is an advantage that is recognized. And it doesn't matter who the contractor might be, they will utilize the ability to basically get out of the neighborhood's way, because they kind of infringe on each other, right? The contractor get in the way of the neighborhood, and the neighborhood in some way, you can say, get in the way of the contractor. Aesthetics, mainly the spend to depth ratio is one of those. The light penetration and the open area of the pier and so on, and all of those will have a little graphic to talk about it. Okay, so the span to depth ratio basically will give you the feeling of how streamlined and how slender the element look like. But within the economy, we actually find that they are all about the same. In order for us to not have to reinforce the girder much more than usual, you end up being a span to depth ratio anywhere between 19 to 20. So it's basically all a wash. Then in terms of the light penetration that we actually had a discussion about, with the girder of the LU and LG girder being so close to the edge of the roadway, the light that can actually shine underneath the roadway is about the same. I mean, with a little bit advantage for the LU girder. But as far as the segmental, is a lot more advantageous because the edge is so thin that actually the light penetrate better than halfway underneath the roof of the roadway. But this is one that is more obvious once you start looking at the graphic. For the LG girder, you need 3 columns with a cap. The LU, you can drop one of the column. You still need the cap. But look at the segmental scheme. Basically, you need the column, and the girder themselves is self-supporting. So there's really nothing in between. There is no cap or anything like that. And that's the reason.
The SB option, does it optically, does it make it look as if it's higher, even if it's not?
It would, yes. The reason is because, again, the girder is sitting lower here, whereas when you're looking from the side, you see much more of the barrier. And then, like 20 feet away, you see the column. So sometimes you cannot differentiate this girder line from, essentially you'll see the sun hitting the barrier, and that's what's highlighted. So that's the reason why it does give a more kind of a streamlined look to it. And in terms of the exposed surface of it, obviously you have a lot more with the LG girder, and then progressively you get fewer exposed surface, just because you have fewer of what we call the wraps of the girder. So again, the ranking order in terms of aesthetic is the SB girder is the highest. And then finally, the cording of the structure, because the LG girder, they are all fabricated in kind of a straight tangent line. Every time there's a curvature, you will actually see variable overhang. And you can see the underside of the girder forming chords around the curve. Now, fortunately, the main line itself doesn't have a lot of very sharp curvature. We talk about the ramp a little bit. The ramp might be a little bit more obvious, but fortunately, even the ramp on this project tend to be a little bit straighter than a lot of the really sharp interchange. And but nonetheless, in terms of the court land, the ranking is exactly the same as all of the other ones. So you can see the sum total is that the SB girder from a static standpoint is in fact superior.
We have
So
to check in with Andy and Gabe. I see Gabe just joined. I'm going to unmute you for a second. I know y'all might be having trouble with feedback on your phone, but I just want to check in with y'all. Did I get you, Gabe? Okay. Do y'all want to? Andy, did you fix your problem with the?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm great. I'm on a Florida vacation, so I'm just kind of listening in.
Okay. Are you able to unmute yourself, Gabe?
Yeah, can you hear me right now?
Can you hear me?
I'm here.
yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear y'all both.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
And which Gabe is this? There's two Gabes in the group.
This is Gabe Giffen, the Freetown Coterie Chair.
Okay, Gabe, thank you. Okay, we've just completed an overview of the structures with a number of questions, which is great. Does anyone want to express any kind of preliminary ideas as to what you're generally seeing and what you like? And then we need to keep on moving because we've got 15 more minutes and we've got a little bit more to cover. Any summary comments anybody want to give on the various structure types and what you saw?
James Proctor wants to jump in.
Not to monopolize this, but one of the evaluation criteria that I don't see in here is the amount of noise that's going to come off these different designs. I'm sure given the different spans, that there's going to be different lengths of break between the spans and stuff like that. I'm sure there's got to be some difference in the noise that's going to be coming off it, even if it's just the height. You guys got any numbers on that kind of thing?
I can.
Go ahead.
Joe, you
John?
want to?
No,
I was just going to say, we are going to actually do some fairly extensive noise analysis, but we're kind of trying to narrow things down a little bit before we do that. The noise will have a number of things will affect noise. One is going to be the height, and we want to talk a little bit, we're going to talk a little more about height in a couple minutes, whether it's the 20 we're talking about here or possibly higher, and we've analyzed up to 30. And secondly, the barrier, the barriers on the very edge of the corridor, how high that barrier is, because clearly the noise source is both the wheels, the tires on the cars and the trucks on the road surface, as well as the location of the motors and the exhaust. And of course, cars generally aren't a problem with a fairly nominal barrier, but trucks tend to be the bigger problem because their exhausts and their motors are generally higher. And we're going to be examining a variety of barrier types as well as heights, so that as we look at the noise and look at those things, we can try to obviously mitigate the noise impact. So the answer to your question overall, James, is stay tuned, but that's a little bit of a primer on noise, and Joe may want to add a little bit.
Right. Well, actually, the only thing that I want to add to that is that as far as the structure type is concerned, the difference will not be significant because they have the same spanning capability. They have the ability to match each other in terms of the number of expansion joints, which is often the source of noises. Okay, so I'll just keep going. This part, I will not be able to talk. Originally, this part was Bradley's architectural part of it, but I would quickly kind of go through and talk about the fact that actually within all the different types, this options of the pier shapes and all that, they're all viable. I mean, none of these type that would exclude a particular kind of pier. So in terms of the static and the option is equal standing in terms of the different structure type.
Would, on those pier options, would local artists be able to come in and do murals, kind of like I saw in Baton Rouge under I-10 at Government? While I was living there, they had a fella come over and paint every one of those, and it just really bumped up the aesthetics for the area. Is that an option for that, or?
Yeah, yes, it is. And glad you asked that question. We're working with the MPO, with Monique at the MPO, and she's putting together a little advisory group that's art and culturally related. And the intent is to talk with them and solicit ideas with them that we'd bring back to the larger group, your group and others, relative to how we might best go about it and where we might best go about it. But clearly piers tend to be, because they're right in front of you and they're at your eye level, they tend to be a real opportunity for art in public places kind of an approach. So, but the short answer is yes, this is a great place to do it. Actually, option 2 was done, something similar to option 2 has been done in a number of places, but I've seen them, and as you've seen them, completely painted or sculptured or textured. And so we intend to be bringing more of that back to you guys.
And I just want to add, the girders get the bridge engineer all excited, but the piers get the community excited. Yeah, that kind of happen all the time. So yeah, so this is the slide that talk to the 22 feet vertical clearance versus the 30. And the premium is not tremendously high. As I mentioned, we are guesstimating the differences to about $15 million for the size of project. It's premium, but it didn't seem to be a tremendous amount. But it does end up giving you a different feel. So I'm just kind of going through this quickly now. Of course, the abutment is driven by the structures and the earth retainage and so on, but this texture of them, in essence, would give you that comfort that this big, massive wall is not going to be, like in the way. It's something that you can appreciate. And so earlier we talked about different railing, and you can texturize the outside of the railing, give it a distinct feel where people get into Lafayette would recognize the image that this is distinctively Lafayette. But this is an example of one of the interchange right outside of Miami.
Yeah, I touched on it in Tuesday's meeting, but as far as maintenance goes, like we're not running around with pressure washers that often in town. So which one of those could stay cleanest longest?
Well, actually, the choice of the material, the finish, and so on, and I think Bradley would be able to talk more authoritatively about that. But there aren't a particular pattern that you cannot design in detail. So in order for it to not attract or age less gracefully than the other. So actually all of these are examples of actual projects, and they have all performed quite well. I mean, it's not like you're going to have to go out there and blast it constantly. But that's a good question that I think that Bradley would be able to shed even more light on.
Of course, something that was mentioned the other day by Bradley, and Bradley's got a ton of experience in integration of art as well as textures and different materials and so forth, is that this is an issue that James just raised, quite an issue. And the real success stories are that have been, some of them around the country, that when they actually do get dirty, the ones that generally have rougher texture to them, that they change, but actually aesthetically they still look pretty cool, because where the dirt collects sometimes tends to highlight the textures even more. And but of course, the whole thing is a challenging design, and we need to think about the maintenance aspects when we're looking at doing these various things. But it's actually been accomplished in a pretty cool way that can change over time with more dirt, but they actually still look pretty cool. And then of course, you know, then they change back once they're cleaned and so on and so forth.
It's sort of like the blue jeans wearing out just the right way.
Yeah. It's like blue jeans wearing.
Yeah, John, in your report out, you could certainly bring up that question and get Bradley to
I will.
eliminate.
I think I'm pretty close to, yep, that is the end of this presentation material. Now, I know that we have limited time, so we didn't go through this very much, but if you have the time, go in there, you would actually be able to see a lot of this actually constructed at each of the location of interest to give a better feel. So I know that we're running a little bit short of time, but
well, we're doing pretty good, Joe.
Yeah, we are. Okay.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes left, so we can feel free to talk some more. I was wondering if people want to dive a little bit more into the height issue. As Joe pointed out, we've looked at both 22 versus 30. Typically, the DOTD is required, well, not typically, the DOTD is required to have a minimum of 16.5 foot clearance under bridges anywhere in the country when you're building an interstate highway. Part of the earlier effort on this project back in the early 2000s, in terms of the environmental analysis and all of that, in the record of decision, it was recommended that here we not go to the 16.5, but we go to at least a 20-foot height. And that was in the record of decision. And that was based on a whole lot of community input, even back at that time in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then as we talked more over the last few years, particularly generally in the downtown area, there was thoughts that maybe we should even go higher. And that was the reason we've done the analysis on the 30 foot. And of course, all of the things that we've seen in terms of aesthetics and so forth get enhanced. Light penetration is enhanced underneath and so on. If you do go higher, there is a premium in cost. Whether that would be considered an enhancement and needed to be funded by others, and or whether it could be funded by the DOTD and or the federal government, it yet to be determined. The number isn't huge in comparison to the overall cost of the structure system, as Joe pointed out. So that's
is that one of those all or nothing things, to where either the whole thing's going to be at that 30-foot range, or the whole thing's going to be at 22, or is it one that as it approaches downtown, it can get to the higher altitude?
Joe, you want to take that, or Steve Wallace, are you still on?
If Steve wanted to, or you want to take that, otherwise I can't just.
I think Steve's gone, Joe. So
okay, so I'd say that that naturally, because of the terrain, there will be a little bit. Some of the places will be higher, some lower. So, but in setting the vertical alignment or the profile of the bridge, we will use whether it is 20 or 16 or 30 as sort of a baseline. So, and it also could be somewhat selective in terms of the particular area that is crossing, where you get the best bang for the buck, so to speak. I mean, there are certain areas that probably naturally it doesn't want to be too high up because there's a ramp coming down because of geometric constraint and so on. But for the most part, I say that the viaduct can benefit for the bulk of the range of the viaduct. if we go for a higher vertical clearance.
But the only other thing too is with the higher bridge is it'll be visible further out. And some people may or may not like that higher visibility because it'll be coming up above the tree line more. So it'll be more visible, more of a visual impact. So that's just something to consider.
That's a point, yes. And it might vary from one location to the other, but yeah, it's a good point.
As far as what goes underneath it, is the difference in the height negligible as far as the options for what can go beneath it?
Want me to take that one, Joe?
Yeah, go ahead. I was.
I think once you get to the 20-foot height, if I just look at the menu of things that have been thrown out that we're going to get to in subsequent workshops, joint use activities, things that could take place underneath and so forth, ranging from everything from farmers markets to gathering spaces of different types to parks, to community recreation centers and things like that, bikeways and those kinds of things. I don't think any of them would require more than a 20-foot height. But we're probably not done with that discussion in terms of alternatives and all of that. So for joint use, but I think 20-foot gives us quite a bit of flexibility, and 30 would give us maximum flexibility if we went that high. But good question. Yeah.
I don't know if you see this notification that we have 42 seconds.
Okay, we probably got time for one more question.
Yeah, one more question, if nobody else has one.
Go ahead.
Can I get some like some case studies, right? Like, hey, this town did 30 feet, this town did 22 feet. They love their 30-footer. These guys wish they'd gone 30 feet, something like that. Same thing with these bridge designs. Do we have other cities that we know these designs have been implemented in?
I'll tell you what, why don't we pull together that information? I think that'd be a great thing for us to pull together and post on the website and get back to you guys in terms of Q&A.
Okay.